The narrative of the Battle of Las Navas de Tolosa in 1212 is the defining moment in the medieval history of the Iberian Peninsula, a dramatic climax born of centuries of religious and political contention. By the dawn of the 13th century, the geopolitical landscape was fractured, yet poised for a unified collision. To the north lay the small, often quarreling Christian kingdoms, Castile, Aragon, Navarre, and Portugal, small, often squabbling entities whose collective ambition was overshadowed by their frequent internal disputes. Their existence was a testament to the ongoing Reconquista, the centuries-long process of pushing back the Muslim rule that began in the 8th century. The true antagonist in this period was the Almohad Caliphate, originating as a fundamentalist religious movement in the Atlas Mountains of North Africa. The Almohads had swept across the Maghreb and into Al-Andalus, uniting Muslim Spain under a strict centralized authority. They were formidable warriors, driven by powerful religious and political fervor. Their power reached its zenith with the catastrophic defeat of the Castilian forces at the Battle of Alarcos in 1195. This defeat was more than a setback. It was an existential crisis for the Christian North. The loss exposed the crippling weakness of disunity, as King Alfonso VIII of Castile received insufficient aid from his jealous neighbors. The other Iberian kings had failed to send adequate support, prioritizing their own small territorial squabbles over the collective defense. The psychological impact of Alarcos was profound. It signaled to both sides that the Almohads possessed the military capacity to complete the conquest of the entire peninsula. Following Alarcos, the new Almohad Caliph, Mohammed al-Nasir or Miramamolin, believed the time was ripe for a final decisive invasion. He spent years meticulously planning and assembling an army of a size that terrified the Europeans. Reports of this massive force, drawn from across North Africa and Al-Andalus, suggested it was virtually limitless, equipped with war elephants and a professional African slave soldier guard, the Black Guard, positioned to defend the Caliph personally. This impending invasion hung over the Christian kingdoms like a death sentence. It was this existential threat that finally spurred a response transcending regional politics. Recognizing that the destruction of Christian Iberia would open southern Europe to the Caliphate, Pope Innocent III acted decisively. The Pope was arguably the most powerful man in Europe at the time, and his declaration in 1211 and 1212 of a full-fledged crusade was a political and religious masterstroke. This was not a regional skirmish. This was granted the same spiritual merit and indulgence as fighting in the Holy Land. The call resonated across the continent. Knights and pilgrims flocked from France, Italy, and beyond, drawn by the promise of salvation and glory. Yet, the foreign contingents proved to be a mixed blessing. Many were ill-equipped for the harsh Iberian summer and the complex, slow-moving logistics. After the successful but brutal siege of the small fortress of Calatrava la Vieja, many foreign knights grew impatient, demanding an immediate battle they were promised. When Alfonso VIII insisted on a disciplined, slow advance, they abandoned the campaign en masse, demoralized and disillusioned by the climate and the perceived lack of plunder. Paradoxically, this exodus strengthened the Christian core. The army that remained was primarily Iberian, led by the three kings whose resolve was now absolute. Alfonso VIII of Castile, the veteran who sought to avenge Alarcos. Sancho VII of Navarre, a powerful and often idiosyncratic monarch known for his immense height and courage. And Peter II of Aragon, the only European monarch to have already been crowned by the Pope. The key to the entire campaign was the political miracle achieved at Toledo, where the three monarchs, with their long histories of rivalry, met to forge an unprecedented alliance. Mediated by the Archbishop of Toledo, Rodrigo Jiménez de Rada, who would later chronicle the battle. The kings set aside decades of territorial disputes and sworn mutual mistrust. This was not a natural alliance, but an alliance of absolute necessity, sealed by an oath taken before the cross. This unity, rarely seen in medieval Europe, was the single most crucial factor in the Christian victory. The combined force then began its fateful march south toward the vast Almohad encampment, which lay strategically across the main routes through the Sierra Morena Mountains. The most direct route was the Despeñaperros Pass, a treacherous gorge that the Almohads had heavily fortified and considered impregnable. Caliph al-Nasir had confidently anchored his massive army beyond this pass, assuming the Christians would have to break themselves against the mountain defenses. However, the Christian army was aided by tactical intelligence, a powerful reminder that history often turns on local knowledge. A local shepherd, according to tradition, guided a small reconnaissance force to a hidden, lesser-known mountain path that bypassed the main Almohad defenses. This maneuver was brilliant. It allowed the Christian army to suddenly emerge from the mountains and array itself on the plains near Las Navas de Tolosa, surprising the Caliph and forcing him to fight on an open field where his vast numbers could be countered by organized maneuver and aggressive heavy cavalry. The stage for the ultimate confrontation was set. The final confrontation at Las Navas de Tolosa on Friday, July 16, 1212, was fought under a searing Andalusian sun. The Christian army, now unified and strategically positioned, faced an Almohad force that dwarfed them in size but was perhaps strategically disadvantaged by the surprise deployment. The Christian battle plan was disciplined and coordinated, organized into three main divisions: the vanguard, a mixed force of knights and infantry led by the Castilian nobility designed to absorb the initial shock of the Almohad charge; the center, commanded by King Alfonso VIII of Castile. This was the main body, featuring the Castilian heavy cavalry, the core of the army's offensive power, and the flanks and reserve, where the two wings were commanded by the allied kings, Peter II of Aragon on the left and Sancho VII of Navarre on the right, providing maneuverability and protection against encirclement. The Almohad army, in contrast, relied on overwhelming numbers. Caliph al-Nasir positioned his vast infantry and light cavalry in the front lines designed to crush the Christian vanguard and envelop the flanks. He reserved his most formidable force, the elite Black Guard, a personal contingent of African slave soldiers, to defend his command post, which was surrounded by a symbolic palisade of chains on a slight elevation at the rear of the battlefield. The battle opened fiercely. The Christian vanguard plunged into the massive Almohad lines and initially performed well, but the sheer weight of numbers began to tell. As the morning progressed, the Christian center and wings started to lose cohesion, taking heavy casualties. Chroniclers describe a moment of profound crisis when the Christian lines, particularly the Castilian center, began to falter, on the verge of breaking. Alfonso VIII, seeing the battle turning against him, was reportedly urged by the Archbishop of Toledo to retreat. The climax of the battle hinged on the desperate courage of the allied kings and the Castilian reserve. Instead of retreating, King Alfonso VIII reportedly rallied his forces, shouting a famous battle cry that inspired the reserve to commit. The Aragonese forces, under King Peter II, executed a disciplined attack on the left flank, preventing a collapse. The ultimate turning point, however, came from the right flank, led by King Sancho VII of Navarre. Seeing the opportunity, Sancho and his Navarrese knights found a weakness in the Almohad line and launched a furious, desperate charge. They did not aim for the main enemy force, but drove directly toward the high ground where Caliph al-Nasir was observing the battle, guarded by the Black Guard and the infamous chain barrier. The Navarrese knights, fighting with a zeal born of desperation, smashed through the chains that protected the caliph's encampment. This act was both a physical and psychological breakthrough. The sight of the Christian banner suddenly advancing into the heart of their command post sent immediate panic through the Black Guard and the forces immediately surrounding the caliph. Muhammad al-Nasir, facing a direct personal threat and seeing his command structure compromised, made the fatal decision that defined the battle. He abandoned his post and fled the field on horseback, leaving his army leaderless. The news of the caliph's flight spread like wildfire through the enormous Almohad army. The discipline and cohesion of the massive Muslim force evaporated instantly, transforming the battle into a monumental and bloody rout. The Christian forces, energized by the collapse of the enemy morale, pursued the fleeing Almohad troops mercilessly. The scale of the loss for the Caliphate was staggering. It was a devastating military catastrophe. The victory at Las Navas de Tolosa was immediately recognized across Europe as a miracle. It was not merely a battle won, it was a geopolitical earthquake that fundamentally and permanently shifted the balance of power on the Iberian Peninsula. The consequences were swift and profound. Caliph al-Nasir, humiliated, retreated to Morocco and died soon after, leaving a power vacuum in Al-Andalus. The centralized authority of the Almohad Caliphate began to rapidly disintegrate, giving way to smaller, vulnerable local Muslim principalities known as taifas. Las Navas de Tolosa was the essential precursor to the great Christian conquests of the following decades, allowing for the fall of the key cities of Córdoba, 1236, and Seville, 1248, to Ferdinand III of Castile. Muslim rule was soon confined to the small southern kingdom of Granada, where it would persist for another 2 centuries, but its dominance was broken forever. The Navarre's charge became legendary. King Sancho VII personally took the chains and the great emeralds from the Caliphate's tent as trophies. The linked chains are displayed today on the coat of arms of Navarre, symbolizing the decisive breakthrough. The battle was immediately woven into the tapestry of Spanish national identity, seen as a divinely sanctioned moment of Christian unity and triumph. It was chronicled in detail by participants like Archbishop Rodrigo Jiménez de Rada in his History of the Deeds of Spain, Historia de Rebus Hispaniae, ensuring its legacy was immortalized. The Battle of Las Navas de Tolosa, 1212, proved that when the historically divided kingdoms of Iberia acted in concert, they could overcome even the most formidable existential threat. It served as the moral and military turning point that accelerated the momentum of the Reconquista, directly contributing to the eventual unification and formation of modern Spain centuries later.